Hi, Doug. How's it going?
Good, Cornell. How are you doing, sir?
Not too bad. And you know what? I must agree with Andrew Gold, who has the podcast On the Edge. You guys should all check that out. Andrew interviews a lot of people, and he has this thing where he doesn't do a big, long introduction. I hate those too. I hate when somebody takes like 10 minutes, and then they do like maybe an embedded ad or something, but they take 10 minutes introducing the guest. And it's like, if you really want to know about this guest, I'll put some links down there and or watch the last show we did, because Doug talks all about his history with Scientology, by the way, in part 1. So if you're really interested in what led up to the story we're going to tell, you can just go and watch the first video. So you gotta, you know what I mean? I'm not being lazy. That's really a better way of doing it. That's the way I like to do it. And
listen, Cornell, you just spent 60 seconds saying you don't like these live intros. So get to no, I'm just fucking with you, bro.
You know what I've done? I've left notifications on YouTube too, so you're going to get that ding every now and again. But thanks everybody for joining, and we have Doug Scott Kramer, ex-Scientologist, who escaped at the age of 33, and we talked about his life with Scientology and his parents that are still members, and the fact that you haven't spoken to them in how long, Doug?
Probably about 10 years, if I had to take a guess.
10 years. That's tough, especially in their twilight years where, it's...
My dad would be in his 80s now, probably. My mom would be about the same.
Wow.
Yep. And my dad's at the top of the bridge, which is called OT8, and he has been for 20 years. So could you imagine? I've said on a previous interview when we talked about this, it's okay for my parents to stay in Scientology because I don't want them to really go through the head trip and trauma if they came to realize everything they believed in was fake. Yeah. Could you imagine that, man?
Waking up in your 80s, you might as well just keep believing in it.
Well, yeah. It's actually safer for them, Cornell.
But it sucks for you.
No, it's okay, because this is only after over a decade of soul searching. Because as I think I mentioned before, I was unbelievably angry when I found out that I was conned. And by the way, just to remind the listeners, this is the book that was dropped off. It's called Combating Cult Mind Control by Steve Hassan. It was dropped off by a concerned friend from my acting class in 2008. And up to that point, I had been not only a full hardcore believing Scientologist, but I was at the top of the bridge. I got up to the famous OT3 level. There was no reason for me to snap out of it. But because I got lucky and this concerned acquaintance from my acting class dropped this off, I was able to get out in a way where I was young. I had my acting class to act out my trauma. And I also threatened my parents' life. They had to get a restraining order on me. I would cry. I couldn't get them on the phone much, but on their answering machine, I would leave messages crying, angry. I went through every emotion that I didn't even know was in my body for a decade. So before I got to the point where I just said, now it's okay that my parents are a Scientologist, and I really mean that, that's taken a long, long time to get through. And I think to any people that are listening that might be coming out of a cult, they know that it's okay to feel angry and to find a healthy way. Like I said, thank God I had acting class, because I wanted to go blow up their building, dude. I wanted to suicide myself for a while. That was in my head because I didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel and deprogramming from this. And the amount of anger that I had, not only at being conned by L. Ron Hubbard for my whole life, but my parents turning my back on me and then becoming my adversaries when I was just trying to wake them up too. So it was all sorts of things about trying to figure this shit out, trying to pass the information over to my parents. They're now attacking me because I'm speaking out about Scientology or trying to wake them up. And I went through all this shit that I could easily hold a grudge on. But like I said, a lot of processing, and I don't mean Scientology, a lot of processing later in my own mind. I have a totally different viewpoint, and I learned a lot from the experience too. And my parents do have every right to make the choices they make, and they suffer the consequence of that every day. And they can always make a different choice any day they want. And then I also took the consequences of my actions, where as brutal as they were, I'm so thankful because it set me free. And the thought of being in Scientology today is, you don't understand what a gift of freedom it is that this happened to me, because it's hard to get out of, and I wouldn't trade positions with them for anything. So I take the consequences of my choices, which I'm glad I feel like that was a choice that was worth it.
Yeah, I saw you on a podcast with Aaron Levin the other day, and he was part of the Sea Org, which is how would you frame the Sea Org as like the monastic, the main, well, the monastic wing of Scientology, and he was God, I just lost that thought. He was no, yeah, you were on there, but someone asked a question about well, this is a big long road I don't want to go down, but it's all about the guy that's on trial at the minute for
Masterson, Danny Masterson.
Danny Masterson from That 70s Show. And someone on your channel had asked the question, what would David Miscavige do if the cops came? I mean, you know, how would this play out? And I said he could hide in a Pringles can.
That was hilarious, by the way. Everybody loved that freaking comment. And also a G.I. Joe box. I'm sorry, I threw up the wrong comment. I can't follow the comments while I'm live, bro. But
I was proud of myself.
The Pringle shit was hilarious.
But yeah, if anybody knows, the leader of Scientology currently is, I think he's 5'3".
Yeah, I think that's right.
Maybe even smaller. My wife's 5'3".
And and Tom Cruise is also close in height to Miscavige.
Yeah,
it's the short man's complex, isn't it? I'm not bagging on short people. I'm just saying there seems to be something with cult leaders like Hitler and stuff, and then being short.
Oh, I didn't know Hitler was short.
Yeah,
I know Napoleon was. And
well, maybe I had that wrong. Maybe Hitler's not short. I just figured he was. Do you know how tall he is actually? Now we need to Google that. Yeah.
Hey Siri, how tall was Hitler? I'm going to be on a list.
Yeah. Adolf Hitler was 5 feet 9 inches.
Okay, so that's about average.
Yeah,
it's average, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. In Ireland, it's definitely tall, but it's average here. So, but the original.
And by the way, Tom Cruise wears stiletto on his shoes, you know, because they're like 3 inches tall.
Yeah, I would too, especially in movies.
I guess I would too.
But the original, I guess leader, inventor of Scientology had a driving license. I think that's what Joe Rogan said. You know, the leader of this religion, actually, it was so recent he had a driver's license.
Yeah,
know? But who was L. Ron Hubbard, for anybody that doesn't really know? L. Ron Hubbard. And who was L. Ron Hubbard, Doug? I guess we'll start there.
What a question that is. Do you have 5 hours? Well, since you titled this Scientology, MK Ultra, and Global Mind Control, right?
Right.
So let me just give you the high point background on his occult background.
Because before we do, one second, I have to be a gentleman and say thank you to Cashew Gessenheit, because she is our moderator tonight, and anything that you mention, she will bring it up in the chat as a link. So she's very good. She's professional at this, and so we will be bringing up links and stuff. But you know, watch out for Cashew. She will bring up any relative links. But I'll provide them all at the end of the show. But anyway, go ahead, Doug.
And did you give Cashew the wrench, which I was unable to do with Goldie on my live stream? Did you figure out how to do that? Because in order for her to pull up links, she has to have that wrench next to her.
Oh, I think that I have. No, but she's been able to do that without me giving her. I think so. Wasn't that right, Cashew? Or do I have to do something?
Cashew, do you see the wrench next to your name, or are you able to pull up relevant links? Because I don't think I don't think Cashew can do that without that wrench.
How do I do that, Cashew?
I don't know, bro. I have no idea. YouTube says all you have to do is hit the 3 buttons next to their name.
Yeah,
but that doesn't work.
Maybe if I put a star beside her name?
That doesn't work either. I tried that.
Oh.
Just know that Cashew's the moderator, and I'll go ahead and type in links or whatever, or you can't. I don't think I can type it on this end, my man, but just if something relevant comes up, maybe leave it in the description box of the videos. Or
I'll do that. Private chat. I think we can. Oh, hold on. She just said something to me. What link do you need? Nothing, Cashew. We just wanted to put a fancy link beside your name. That's all. But I'll find out next time. But just know that Cashew
it's easy to do. I'll figure it out, and I'll pass the information over to you on how to do that. But it's easy to do for the next one, Cashew.
Okay. All right. So who is L. Ron Hubbard, and how did this all start?
L. Ron Hubbard was a born sociopath, and he basically, he grew up in Tilden, Nebraska in 1911. Note the 911 and the year.
Oh.
No, it's just a joke, but that always strikes me as here comes L. Ron Hubbard into the world. So at the age of 15, some say 16, but irregardless, in his teenage years, he became fascinated by the occult via a book called The Book of the Law by Aleister Crowley. For people that don't know, I'm sure your audience does, but for people that don't know, he's the most famous black magician in the last century, and he has a massive, massive influence on the world. Before that, there was a character named John Dee. It's like every century there's a new black magician that's kind of famous in their time. And so Aleister Crowley is that. And Hubbard was basically trying to emulate that or do one up from Crowley. That's how I read this story. So he reads the Book of the Law at 15 or 16 years old. And then in so I'm going to skip his Navy career. People pretty much know about that. He was in the Navy. He got relieved of command he was commanding 2 ships, and he got relieved command from both of those because he was firing on the Mexican coast in one of them where there was no people. He was he couldn't follow orders like any typical narcissist or psychopath. So he had a very shitty Navy career. He spent the last few months in the hospital bitching about ulcers. His eyesight was fucked up, so he claims. Some of these were actually true, as we find out later in his affirmations, and some of them are made up so he could get out of being in the Navy because he was basically a coward. So after his Navy career in 1938, to cut to the chase here, the first major experience that he had, which is going to lead to Dianetics and Scientology, was he had a dental extraction. He went under, and he claims he had an NDE or near-death experience for 8 minutes. He said he was shown a smorgasbord of all the knowledge that's beyond visible light, that's beyond the conscious mind, like the Akashic records. You know what I mean? He was showing, like in one shot, all the data about Jesus, about what heaven is about, etc. So that became a book that was never released, that originally had the title The One Command, and then it became known as Excalibur. And Hubbard created a myth around this. It is a real book, and people have confirmed seeing it. But the myth that he created around it, since he wasn't able to get a publisher, is that anybody who read it would either commit suicide or go insane. So the reason I mentioned Excalibur and The One Command is because this is going to tie into the philosophy of Scientology. First, he gets the idea, like any cult leader or guru, that somehow, whether through divine intervention, someone speaks to him, a near-death experience like Hubbard claimed, we can never know what's really true or not with this fucking guy. Somehow or another, they get the all knowledge. And then Hubbard felt compelled to do something about this. He wrote to Forrest Ackerman, who was his literary agent at the time, saying, after Excalibur failed in 1938, I need to back up before we get to Forrest Ackerman. So in 1938, he wrote The One Command. And by the way, The One Command is to survive, which became a main theme for the book Dianetics and subsequently Scientology. Also in The One Command was a main focus of it was on the psychology of a lynch mob. Don't ask me to explain. That's what the book was about. So 1940, he joins his first occult order. It was a Rosicrucian occult order, and he got up to the first 2 neophyte degrees before his membership expired that same year. And also, in relation to the Rosicrucian, I have a video on my channel on the Scientology series called The Bridge to Total Amnesia, where it shows where he got the Scientology cross, which is a Rosicrucian cross. And it's basically, if people want to see it, I got the graphic on that video, but it's a crossed out Christian cross. And that's why when you see the Scientology symbol, people often ask, what are they doing with the Christian symbol and all that? Well, one, it's to cloak it as a religion when it's not. It's a scam. And then also it's the Rosicrucian cross. And specifically, since Hubbard later, which we're going to get into, claimed to be the Antichrist, it's a crossed out Christian cross, which should be your first clue that you're walking into something evil. So we're at 1940. He joins his first Rosicrucian order. He's already into Crowley, eating up his texts like the Master Therion, the Book of the Law, and stuff as a teenager. So 1945, after bitching in the Naval Hospital, he gets out and immediately, for reasons that are still unbeknownst to this day, heads to Jack Parsons' house in Pasadena, California. And he was there between 1945 and 1946. If you ask Scientology, if you need to jump in, Cornell, too, I mean, I'll just tell you the story, but if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt.
Well, I just wanted to go over Jack Parsons, but I'm sure you will.
Sure, we're getting there. Okay, so 1945, he arrives at Jack Parsons' house. And for your listeners, Jack Parsons was a famous rocket scientist. He was a genius. In fact, they have a lab out here in Pasadena. And by the way, he died in a mysterious accident. He was blown up. And there's actually allegations that Hubbard might have had something to do with that, since he claimed that he was his, quote, very good friend, just like Aleister Crowley, even though they never met. So anyways, after he gets to Parsons' house, he starts doing the black magic rituals that Parson is into. Oh, I wanted to go back. I'm sorry. There's just so much information. Pardon me if I jump around to connect these dots, but I might have to go in a non-linear fashion. So there's been a place out here in Pasadena called Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and some speculate that that's actually the initials for Jack Parsons Laboratories. Such was his fame. And also they have a crater on the dark side of the moon. Woo! Named after him. Yeah. So just to give you some idea of kind of how famous he was, his occult background was not really known about, but he was like sort of leading a secret life, as he was also a genius rocket scientist. Hubbard moves in. He cons Parsons out of his girlfriend, becomes the life of the party at the place. There's tales of him sitting around the kitchen table late at night and enthralling the people that were staying there. Now, Jack Parsons had a huge house / mansion in Pasadena, which was a hand-me-down from his parents, and he only rented it out to eclectic hippies, people that were into the occult, people that were on the fringes of society, which was just going to become big time as we get into the 50s and particularly 60s.
That is Jack Parsons, by the way.
Yeah. That's not a very good photo of him, man.
No. Anyway.
You got to show the one with him with the rocket and everything. Okay,
yeah, I'll find it while you're talking.
So I want to get this across too, man. This is a good point. Like Mike Rinder and Aaron were talking, and he asked Rinder about was Satanism / the occult / Thelema, which is Crowley's philosophy. Was that a big part of Scientology? Aaron asked him, and Mike, bless his heart, was oblivious. I mean, he's like, yeah, I never saw Hubbard doing black magic rituals on the ocean and all that. Well, he probably wasn't. But nonetheless, that was the formation of Scientology. By the way, Cornell, on the series that I'm doing in season 3, I'm going to go over all of this, because even though there's been bits and pieces of it, when I lay it out, it's really amazing just how much of Scientology's concepts, ideas, everything from past lives to the birth engram to the way that he structured the levels, starting with level 0, they're all based off of his the person that he really looked up to growing up, Crowley. So what Crowley and Parsons got up to were black magic rituals, occult rituals at his house, because Crowley was in England, and he had an organization called the OTO, which stands for Ordo Templi Orientis. By the way, that's where the OT levels come from. They're not, yeah.
I was in the OTO for a year, by the way.
I want to hear about that too, man. I actually wanted to ask you about that. Let me just finish this real quick, and then I don't want to reverse the interview, but I want to ask you more about that. So just to give you some idea of where he's stealing the words and stuff from. So Jack Parsons had the only lodge out here in America, I believe, at the time, and that was called the Agape Lodge, and it was an OTO lodge. In other words, it was a Crowley lodge out here in Pasadena. And because Hubbard was able to let me back up a little. So Jack Parsons was in communication with Crowley via letter. Hubbard supposedly never met Crowley, even though he called him his very good friend in a lecture series in 1952 called the Philadelphia Doctor Course Lecture. So here you have Hubbard idolizing Crowley. Jack Parsons is actually friends with him because he can communicate with him. And he's telling Jack, beware of Hubbard. He's a freaking con artist. But Jack fell under his spell. He was captured by his malignant narcissism. And, that can also come with sort of an energetic quality. So Hubbard not only captured Jack, but everybody at the house. He was the life of the party. And as Mike was saying in that, he just thought that he was doing these rituals to steal Jack's girlfriend, which he subsequently did, and then abandoned it. But as we'll see later, that's not the case. So anyways, he does end up taking off with his gal. But before we get to that point in the story, the main ritual that they did was called the Babylon working. According to Crowley and his philosophy, this would be the Whore of Babylon. And the Whore of Babylon, so let me cut to a long story short. Parsons believed in this. He did rituals to summon the Whore of Babylon, which eventually showed up as a fiery red woman, fiery red hair, and the name of Marjorie Cameron. He thought this was the Whore of Babylon to then do the next ritual, which is to incarnate the moon child, to bring in the Aeon of Horus. I know we're going to lose people with all these technical terms. That's why I'm going to do a whole episode when we get to season 3, explain this really simply so these words make sense. But let me just cut through this. So they attempt the moonchild ritual, blah, blah, blah. Before that actually gets done and has any real success, Hubbard then takes off with Parsons' wife. They go, also Parsons stole Jack Parsons' money. He conned him into setting up a joint business venture to buy ships. So he didn't make good on that, took off with his wife, went to sail out to the ocean and sail away from Parsons. And Parsons went and went to a hotel that was on the shore of where they were leaving, did a banishing ritual complete with black robes and everything in the middle of his hotel room. And apparently, not necessarily because of black magic, but the winds did actually go up suddenly, and Hubbard's pulled back to shore, pulled into court, and has to pay Parsons his money back. So now we're up to 1945, 1946. So he has this love of Crowley, this near-death experience, which gives him all the data in the universe. He has this malignant narcissism going on where he sees himself as some spiritual figure. He gets the secret OTO levels delivered to him while he's at Parsons Lodge at the OTO. He was able to learn about all the initiation rituals that normally takes a long time. As you know, secret societies are structured where you give out different levels of truth as you go up, and the OTO structure the same way, exactly like Scientology. So because he conned Parsons, he was able to learn all the secret data and the top levels that would normally take years to get to. So as I said, he then incorporates that into Dianetics. A big part of that being the basic, which Crowley talks about. A big part of Scientology, which came from Crowley, is about your memory, particularly your past track. Crowley called it the magical memory. And if you send it backwards and you get to basic, which Hubbard called it, and the birth engram, and then birth, what Crowley called it, you can, the whole idea is to just remember, to get your memory back, and then eventually go into past lives. And like Hubbard claimed to have done in that dental procedure, learn and have an exterior viewpoint of reality so you can know what the hell's going on in the world. Another part of that was he believed in the guardian angel, which was espoused by Crowley. In order to be a practicing magus or magician, you have to get in contact with your guardian angel. And also Parsons was convinced and wrote to Crowley that Hubbard did have an incredible connection with his guardian. And he felt that even though he didn't know too much about magic, and this is why he disclosed to him the secret OTO levels, he still felt that Hubbard had some magical ability, was very in touch with his guardian, and somehow or another was an incredible magician. So anyways, right before he formed Dianetics, and I have this on my channel, using Crowley's technology of self-hypnosis, drugs, and implanting affirmations in the subconscious mind, he wrote in his diary, which gives us the best insight. I have part 1 up right now. It's called Diary of a Madman. And part 2 will go even into more detail as to his love of Crowley and what he was going to then form with Dianetics. So a couple years before Dianetics forms, he writes these affirmations. He puts himself in self-hypnosis, which is exactly what we then end up doing in Scientology. He puts us under hypnosis, and then the solo levels or the confidential levels of Scientology, we put ourselves into self-hypnosis. So anyways, these affirmations, people should check them out. They give you a very good insight as to the rest of Scientology, Hubbard's headspace, and just where he got this special technology. Because I got to tell you, Cornell, when I was under hypnosis and being disassociated with this kind of stuff, it really felt amazing. And until I got another explanation for it, until I learned about hypnosis, his background in Crowley and where he got all this stuff from, not just Crowley, only then was I able to understand the ecstatic states of mind that Scientology sends their parishioners into. This is what is happening that's not talked about too much, where the real power of Scientology comes from, and why people can't believe Scientologists can fall for the stuff that they do fall for. They're being put in literally a hypnotic trance from day one when they start the communication course. This is all planned with malice aforethought by Hubbard dude who is expertism in hypnotism and the occult. Okay. So now we have the
before you go on,
sure, please.
For people listening, if you've watched Tom Cruise over the years jumping on couches and stuff, and with this famous Scientology commercial, which I think they pulled down after a while, where he seems manic. Now I don't know if Tom Cruise is manic, but that would be a result of those kind of feelings, that hypnotism, and that's why he goes off the handle, and he seems like he's having a manic episode.
People thought he was on cocaine, by the way.
Right.
And but he's not. That is exactly what Scientology auditing feels like. In fact, Cornell, you know what I think? He was auditing on OT7 at that time. And just for your listeners, I don't want to get off track or too complex here, but that's the second to the highest level you can get to in Scientology. And we are removing alien souls from our body. And at that level, the physical universe itself. And when I was doing these levels, because I was putting myself in self-hypnosis, locating beings and freeing them, it felt fucking amazing. And it felt like I was on coke. I've never done coke. I've only done weed, but I described it like I would feel stoned constantly. I felt like Scientology. I used to be a massive pot smoker. I still smoke pot, but when I was smoking pot as a Scientologist, that's a complete no-no. They 100% frown upon anything like that, because part of that is because you won't fall for it. You'll be able to see through it. I'm not encouraging people to smoke weed. I'm just saying it can be in certain circumstances a protector against mind control. Hence, Hubbard said no LSD, no weed, no nothing. Meanwhile, he was doing every drug known to man. But that is where Tom Cruise is. He's not on coke. He's fucking, what I think is, he got an auditing session on OT7. He went and gave himself a self-hypnosis session. You have to do 5 to 6 sessions a day on the level that he was at when he was on Oprah. So I sure he went into a session 10 minutes before that, 20 minutes, he would have found a place in the back room or at his house right before he came down to the studio. That's why he looks cracked out of his mind. And we really believe, Cornell, I fucking believe that we were saving the world. You guys have no idea what I'm doing in my locked bedroom, freeing beings, and how much I'm helping out the planet. And it gives you you add the hypnotism and these heady thoughts that we're saving the planet, and these unbelievably damaging. If you believe in that, Cornell, like I did, I mentioned in a previous interview, these beings would talk to me at night. I had a nervous breakdown outside of the organization that I was doing, and my dad had to rescue me. It totally gave me multiple personality disorder and schizophrenia, which is exactly what it's designed to do. That's when we get into the MK Ultra shit, when they were learning how to use dissociative states, split the mind into different alters or alternate personalities, and then get people to do their bidding that they decide to program into them. By the way, if anybody doesn't think that's true, I can tell you just from having lived Scientology that not only did I do things against my moral code due to being under a spell, but it took me into reality that would not be possible without this technology. So I just want to let people know I am a relatively normal person. I grew up in Scientology, and they took me into an Alice in Wonderland world, to use a metaphor. And that world was so different and so not true, but it's just as believable as the world that you guys live in. We can't see any of the it's like firewalls in our minds. So we can't see any. When you go up to us as Scientologists and say Xenu and this and that, first of all, only 5% of the Scientologists get up to the confidential level where they learn about Xenu. We're led in very slowly through sensible, basic tools for life, and we're being put into a trance completely without our knowledge. Now, we're not falling asleep necessarily. There's nobody swinging a watch in front of our head. That's why I try to break this down on the channel, because it's subtle. We're totally conscious. We're in a wide awake state, and we're being implanted with Hubbard's gibberish, space opera, and madness. He's literally transferring over bit by bit his mind to ours. That's why if you're in for 10 years, you become what's called a Ron droid. And that is somebody that thinks like Hubbard, speaks like Hubbard, and acts like Hubbard. And remember how we were talking about the Sea Org earlier, Cornell? Those are the ones where they're drilled every day, as they say in Scientology, to burn this tech, i.e. burn Hubbard's ideas into our soul. So it's literally just a mind transfer. Hubbard was a very, very sick man who was trying to heal himself through self-hypnosis, and he thought those tools worked. So he was teaching us to be hypnotists. That's what the auditor is, without knowing it, hypnotizing other people to hypnotize other people. And that doesn't work. You might be able to hypnotize yourself to quit smoking or whatever, but what it does with what Hubbard's doing is it bypassed all the problems that I had in life. It put a firewall in there and gave me positive affirmations, so I couldn't literally see the problems that I was dealing with. This is why Scientologists might die from cancer. My dad almost died from cancer. Thank God he went down and got it fixed, because these hypnotic firewalls are put into our mind where, rather than handling things physically, it's all spiritual in Scientology. Rather than handling things that are happening to us in the real world, we can't see them, and we just use the power of our mind and self-hypnosis to convince ourselves that we're great. Exactly what Hubbard was doing. He should have been in a mental institution, but and he was always paranoid, by the way. That's why he hated the psychs, partially because of exposing MK Ultra, partially because of his paranoia, because he was crazy and he was always in fear of these fucking people. Plus, he tried to sell a pseudoscience to the psychiatrist, and they laughed at it. That's where his vendetta comes from. And that's where he is trying to pass on to us Scientologists how he supposedly healed his sickness with black magic and hypnotism. And that's exactly what Scientology is. Just to finish up the story real quick. After the affirmations, after he self-hypnotizes himself and he's convinced that he's this God that has all this knowledge of the mind, a few years after that, in 1950, he forms Dianetics. And when we get into the occult part on the videos, I'll even break down the word Dianetics, because it has the word D-I-A-N-E. That's Diane. And he named one of his daughters Diana. He named his ship Diane. One of his ships was named the Magician when he was in the Explorers Club. Every word that he used, Scientology has the word science in it. Like I said, the crossed out Christian cross. In Crowley, you start everything with level 0, grade 0. You don't start with 1, 2, 3 like normal people. He has his guardian angel on his right-hand shoulder. So this is the state of mind when he puts out Dianetics. He honestly feels that he's discovered how to take people back to basic, the birth engram, just like Crowley said, would relieve you of all trauma. When that memory comes back and you can remember your whole lifetime, you'll be healed. And that's what Dianetics is based around. And then when you get into Scientology, that was officially incorporated. The very first church of Scientology was in Camden, New Jersey in 1953. And by the way, coincidentally or not, in April of 1953, that's when Project MK Ultra officially kicked off. Now, in 1954, he wrote a book called Science of Survival, which exposed this. He called it pain drug hypnosis because they didn't have a name for it. And that's exactly what they were doing to try to create Manchurian candidates. So somehow or another, he already knew about this, and it didn't come out into public consciousness. Cornell, even in the people that were doing MK Ultra all over America, it was so compartmentalized that even people that were at the top levels didn't know what they were actually a part of. So in 1974, 1975, they had congressional and state hearings, which brought this to the fore. This is, again, using people in prisoners, high-level universities, institutions, psychiatric institutions all over America, Canada, and Europe to find out if they could make these Manchurian candidates that we're describing that Scientology makes. So he tried to expose them in Science of Survival while simultaneously using an even better version of those techniques against us because they're subtle. And he's such an interesting character because he kind of played both sides. He would even sell auditing folders to the KGB, according to his son, Nibs. I look at Scientology as, I don't have any proof of this yet, and I'm still learning more and more. And I know Hubbard's a fuck up in the Navy and all that. He wasn't necessarily, it's hard to say what went on in there. Scientology will claim his records were sheep dished and other people will claim, who knows, right? But let me just say that he knew a lot of knowledge about how to brainwash us, even in the early 50s. And he knew about the government projects, but didn't come out until the mid 70s. And he was using those techniques in a better way. And also the CIA was monitoring these cults that all popped up in San Francisco. We can get into that when we get into the Laurel Canyon scene. But in the 50s and 60s, when Scientology came out, we had the Process Church, we had Jim Jones. There's a million cults that came out, and they all gathered mostly in San Francisco. And that ties in with Manson and the serial killer crap that we'll probably get into. But just to keep it on track here. So Hubbard starts Scientology in the same year as MK Ultra. He's doing very subtle mind control techniques against us because he's not, unlike you and Cameron, who was doing the real MK Ultra. They would drug people. They would play tapes to them over and over, which is called psychic driving. The equivalent of that in Scientology is listening to Hubbard's taped lectures over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many thousands and thousands of hours I would get a high out of coming out of an auditing session while I'm suggestible and still in an altered state of consciousness. Go listen to Hubbard babble on the lectures in the chorus room, hours, days, years on end. Same concept called psychic driving, but we just think we're listening to lectures. Hubbard's not using drugs to put us under. He's using electricity in the e-meter cans. So I described in previous interviews how the light trance state is begun by the auditing session. So it takes a long time to explain. So I'll skip that part. People could look at other interviews or whatever for that part. But once you get into that light trance state, it's sort of like anything goes. And that's sort of the only way to explain Scientology and how somewhat, I'm not a dumbass. I'm not the smartest either, but there's a lot of somewhat intelligent people in Scientology. We had famous, celebrities. We've had, there's been scientists in there. Anybody can get caught when they go under. Remember you were talking earlier about Tom Cruise acting like a fanatic at Oprah? The equivalent of what you're watching there. Imagine that you're watching a stage hypnotist show. You just got hypnotized, which he did, because let's say, he went into session, took himself into a self-hypnosis session on OT7 right before going on Oprah. You're literally looking at the equivalent of someone in a stage show being told that, to act like an orangutan. And they're not stupid. They just simply respond to the suggestions implanted into their subconscious, which any and all of us would, have that ability. So long story short, that gives you, I know that's a long answer to your first question, Cornell, but that gives you some background of just how much influence the occult, hypnotism, and Hubbard's headspace was at the very beginning of Scientology. And then I guess we can take the timeline up from there, or whatever else you want to talk about.
Yep, I'm just providing a link on cults and Reddit so that people can join in if they want.
Oh, cool.
So, one second.
You got to bring up some of these comments too, because some of these people are making some. I don't want to tell you what to do, dude, because I know it's hard to throw. But people are making some good comments.
1 second. I want this to. Okay, so let me see. We got some comments here. Well, Chris Kimball asked, wasn't there a South Park episode that mentioned it? And yeah, it basically breaks down the belief system in Scientology at the higher levels with Xenu and stuff, and
that is 100% accurate. There's a little bit that's missing, but the story is accurate on South Park.
Yeah. Name Tree brings up some good stuff too. Name Tree's pretty plugged in by the looks of it. Let me see. The Temple of Set, founded by military intelligence. Oh, Michael Aquino. I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah. Michael Aquino is a perfect example of what Hubbard might be. All of these people, surprisingly enough, from the serial killers to the cult leaders or whatever, to weird scenes inside the canyon, which I talk about on the channel or whatever. This is the Laurel Canyon scene. They all have, all the musicians coming out of that era in the late 60s, early 70s. They all have very interesting military family backgrounds. When you see it once, it's a coincidence. When you see it twice, but what I look for in all this conspiracy crap, not to get, because I don't want to go into flat Earth and QAnon and all this, because there's a whole bunch of bullshit in there too. But what I look for is patterns. So when I see something happening over and over again, then you can make a conclusion, probably a good one, that there's something to that.
So Hillary Clinton is Grand Dame in the Temple of Set.
I don't know about, I have no idea about that. But when I hear Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, they actually were they have interesting ties to Scientology back in the 90s.
Really?
Yeah. In fact, I have a video that I'm working on where John Travolta is talking to Charlie Rose on an interview and talks about how fundamental Clinton was in handling the objections in Germany and as well as all over the world. Check this out. He was doing a movie called Primary Colors where he kind of imitates Clinton. And just to show you how much politicians and actors and all this is like one click, he used Clinton's favor because Clinton had a friend in his college dorm that was a Scientologist. And he just wanted to help John Travolta out with the Scientology problem because his roommate was a really swell guy when he knew him in college. So there can't be anything sus about Scientology. So I'll tell you what, John, you go ahead and make me look good in this Primary Colors movie because it's obvious you're imitating me. And I'll go ahead and take care of the problem in Germany, etc. And they did. I have a whole video on that, by the way, that I'm
Mm.
like halfway through. I don't know when it'll be out, but it's very interesting. The connections of Clinton. I don't know anything more about this, but none of this stuff would surprise me. I just have to look into it more. When you
Yeah.
start to look at the top of this pyramid and you look at the politicians and actors and cults, they really are chummy. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that they're going to scratch each other's backs to help each other out. And also Clinton is a complete narcissist. He's a sociopath. So, you know, that they kind of like attracts like.
That's what your guest, what's his name? The famous psychopath.
H.G.
narcissist?
Tudor. Yeah. By the way, Cornell, we're doing a whole 3-part cult series where we're going to break. HG's been getting all informed and reading, you know, he's read Rinder's book and everything. He's been getting informed on Scientology, because what I'm going to do is tell my story about Scientology. And as a narcissistic psychopath, to your listeners, check him out on the channel, make up your own mind, but he's very, very good about breaking this subject down. So he's going to explain to me while I tell my story exactly how the love bombing worked, how I got captured, and we're going to do it in 3 parts. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah, H.J. Tudor is a self-proclaimed psychopathic narcissist, and self-aware, and he is faceless, and that's a fake name, because it might, you know, affect his I don't know.
Hey, if people are interested in that, just go listen to, we have 9 interviews up. Number 10, 11, and 12 are the cults thing. So people have all sorts of questions when they first hear, what do you mean self-aware? Why would he give you information about his kind? He's a narcissist. It's all going to be lies. Just go watch the videos. He answers all the questions and then make up your own mind.
Yeah, I will provide links for
cool.
your channel after this.
And by the way, Cornell, you know, it's kind of relating to the subject. I studied a bunch of narcissists, like the Little Shaman, Sam Votkin, Richard Grannon. There's a whole bunch of people that are really good on explaining this subject. I just happened to run across him in 2016. And unlike these other people, I read The Sociopath Next Door. So already that's a really important subject about what we're talking about with cult leaders and even the MK Ultra and Clinton. To know what a conscienceless person is, to know that there's people that actually walk around you. This is what my parents are, and this is how I got manipulated into Scientology. They're not the majority of people, thank God. But I'm telling you, bro, if you're an empathic person or you're not a narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, whatever you want to call it, it's a person lacking a conscience. So unlike me and you and most of the population, they don't have a fail-safe mechanism. It's our conscience. It's feeling guilty that will prevent us from doing certain things, but they do not think like that. In fact, Hubbard got off on conning people. Let me tell you a story about that real quick, just to drive home the point. And this is why I bring HG on, because I'm trying to connect dots. And a huge part of that is to understand psychopaths, because they have a tendency to get to the top of positions in the world. And then like an abused family, like the human race, we get abused by these people. So and that's exactly what happened to me in Scientology. And on a lesser scale, my family was a cult. So that's why I bring him on and other people that are much better at explaining these topics than I am. But here's a quick story about Hubbard, just to drive that point home. There was a Granada report, one of the only interviews you can see on Hubbard in black and white on YouTube. It's easy to find. And right before that interview, this is apparently not a rumor. This was written down by the guy who interviewed him. So I believe that it's actually true. He asked him right before they were shooting the next morning. They had to track him down. He never gives interviews, but he was just in the right mood. So he decided to grant these people an interview. Off the record, no cameras around, late at night on Hubbard's boat, 3 a.m. or some shit. The reporter said, look, we're off record. This isn't going to go out. Nothing's recorded. I need to know. Do you know that you're conning people? Or do you believe in what this is the infamous question that people ask all the time. And he says, yes, I do. But he says, you know what? I get off on it. I fucking love it. And the part that I like the most is capturing the most clever. So this gives you an idea of the predatory. You and me walk around. We're trying to have a job, do our normal life, raise our family. And then there's another subset of species like Hubbard and Clinton and Epstein. They're predators, and their whole life is a different world than you and I can live in and understand. And their focus of attention is on, how can I capture people? How can I enslave people in this world? How can I control the world? Hubbard wanted to take over the entire world with Scientology. So if the more we know about this information, the more we can protect ourselves from these predators that, I don't want to scare people. I was going to say they're all around us, and they are. but
They are.
they're a small percentage. But that just like Hubbard, this is a man who's been dead since 1986, but has destroyed my life to this day and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that he's damaged in his 7-decade reign. And this is just one guy who should have been thrown in a mental institution.
And before we go on to the valley,
the canyon to you, sir. The valley is a completely different thing. Yeah.
I know. I get mixed
funny,
up. There's so much stuff.
I hear you. There is.
Before we go on to that, maybe your listeners aren't aware of the Sea Org and how the Sea Org came to be. Wasn't it because, I know you already kind of went over this, but Hubbard reneged on a deal. He got $10,000 from Jack Parsons and bought a boat, and he used that boat to evade international authorities, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up, because that takes us to the canyon.
Right.
So this period of time when he formed what you're talking about, which is called the Sea Organization, again, they kind of operate like a little off-book intelligence agency in certain ways, because as he was going around to various countries, the governments of those countries were wanting to prosecute him. They were sussing the con. They felt that something was off, that he was infiltrating. They tried to take over Clearwater, Florida, here in the U.S. He was always trying to infiltrate places. I think he tried to take over Rhodesia. He wanted a country of his own, or at least a city like Clearwater, Florida, which he was half successful at. So during that time period, when we're talking about when the MK Ultra was kicking off here in San Francisco, this would be the late 60s to the mid 70s, or maybe early 70s. That's exactly the time when Hubbard was being investigated, went on to ships, and he formed the Sea Org. He was conscious of how the government works in a certain way, and completely insane and paranoid, and knowing he's doing something wrong in another way. So he had reason to be fearful, and added on to his supreme paranoia, and still believing his tech is the only answer. He healed himself. He then told his Sea Org, we're forming the Sea Org to protect ourselves from the government. Like any cult, it's now us against them. They're drugging our children. The psychiatric people are over drugging our children, which in some ways is true, but he took it to the extreme. And also, if you study psychiatry, or particularly psychology, which he was also against, that will show you how you're being manipulated in Scientology, so you wouldn't be able to fall for it. So he in Scientology does what's called dead agenting a subject, meaning he told us he was unhypnotizing us while he was hypnotizing us. He told us he was defending from the US government and governments of the world by forming the Sea Org, when actually he was hiding his own fraud. So in other words, he was always dead agenting, or getting there first, to make us not look into hypnotism, not look into psychology. We knew that these subjects were already bad because Hubbard told us so, and told us he's doing the opposite of what they're doing. This is why we don't look for outside information when they're in the bubble world. We're also being hypnotized to follow Hubbard's train of thought. Like I said, it's a thought transfer more and more and more as we go into his cult.
This is an interesting question that Karen brings up, because a New York State attorney that I interviewed, one of my first interviews, said that 4 out of 100 men have a sexual interest in children. That's a weird statistic. Yeah, she blew my mind with that. I'm like, what? So one of the dads that I know probably is like that, but that's interesting. Yeah, that's scary too.
I asked H.G. Tudor that question just to get his take on it. He said 1 in 6 was a narcissist, a sociopath, or a conscienceless person, in other words. 1 in 6. And think about it, that number's growing, because as we get manipulated more, we are going to have more trauma, which is going to cause people to become sociopaths easier, and to have that form as a kid. HG doesn't claim to be an expert. I don't claim to be an expert. I'm not. I just read a lot of books. And if people want to know what he has to say about how the hell does narcissism, a conscienceless person, form in the first place, he has a very interesting breakdown in like interview 1 or 2. Because that's just such an important subject. Also, somebody said up here, psychopaths are not a mental disorder. They are deliberate in their actions. Yeah, exactly. The only thing on that is that H.G. Tudor claims to be a self-aware narcissist. In other words, if you were to say to a narcissist that they're a narcissist, they don't, and if you yourself question if you're a narcissist, you're not. They don't actually have the ability to know that about myself. I can't tell you how many times I told my parents, particularly my mother, that she's a narcissist and she manipulates. They don't have the ability to see that themselves. It's a self-defense mechanism that's basically formed through early childhood trauma and possibly a predisposition to a genetic component. So yeah, I don't think that unless you're a self-aware narcissist, HG Tudor put Bill Clinton in that category, and possibly Boris Johnson. There are certain people that know that their actions are deliberate, but for most psychopaths or narcissists, they truly believe what they're doing is right. You know, they think they're the greatest person. They're not sitting there at night going, yeah, woohoo, I'm gonna, plan things out. They just act unconsciously and automatically. That's who they are.
Can you be partially? Because sometimes I've felt partially that I've acted in my own self-interest.
That's a great question, but no, you cannot.
Not in an evil way, but just sometimes you're like, yeah, I was a bit of an asshole there, and I did that for my own, benefit. And
but you're asking questions that a narcissist doesn't. I'm telling you. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm taking my information from all those sources. I just told you a million YouTube videos, and everybody has an opinion, right? But you know what? There's also personal experience too, Cornell. And I can tell you that what I had to learn the hard way and what allowed me to start the healing process with Scientology. And this is when I ran across HG's information in 2016, right? When I needed to know this, because I recognized that Scientology was a cult run by a narcissist, Hubbard. But I had no idea. And then I was dating a Russian girl at the time that was doing that. It felt familiar. The love bombing, something. I didn't know it could happen in a one-on-one relationship. And then I happened to run across Tudor's information, and he just penetrates to what the fuck's going on. And then I recognize now I understand my parents. This is why I'm on year 8, and they're still not understanding. They're still fighting me. Like, what's going on? And then one of the key points is that they can never change. Once it's formed, they don't suddenly have the ability to grow a full emotional spectrum in later life. Their conscience is shut down. It's not going to come back. They cannot get that in later life. So once it's formed, and it's formed before your teenage years, if you're not a narcissist by the time you're a teenager, you also can't be made into one because you already have a conscience and the things are not shut down. I became what's called a secondary sociopath in Scientology, and that's specifically what they're designed to make. Again, you become Hubbard. So I wasn't a sociopath. I can't be one. But dude, while I was under that spell for 20 or so years or however long it was, I acted that way. I didn't care about anybody. I was selfish. My world was very small, and my empathy only extended to my immediate surroundings. When
even though you're trying to save the world.
Yeah, but it's a narcissistic spirituality. I call Scientology a spiritual bypass. You know someone like Teal Swan? Do you know who Teal Swan is? Do you know any of these other New Age gurus? Scientology is like a New Age philosophy. Again, born out of the 50s and 60s when these New Age cults were coming out. They espouse always be happy, never look at the negative, fill yourself with positive affirmations. Go, go, go. You can do it. Self-hypnosis. The Secret, the book The Secret, which sold a gazillion books. It's all the same thing. I call Scientology an advanced gobbledygook version of the law of attraction or The Secret. So again, patterns, it really is like the same thing. So we pretended like we're helping people, but it was all self-serving. I wanted Scientology to help me in my life to get acting jobs. I wanted to have power over people so I could put my intention. This is where the black magic and the spells kick in. It's about putting your intention in other people's minds, like voodoo shit, like other people's universes, to make them do what you're thinking. It's really like that, bro. And it's a sick way of thinking. It's a horrible trap to be in. And it's really childish. You know, when I think about these people doing The Secret, putting up their little vision boards. Now, there's nothing wrong with that because you're not in a cult. You're not being manipulated for that. It's not like being in Scientology at all. It's innocent in a certain way, but it's also super childish, from my opinion, because while your thoughts will influence your reality for sure. I mean, your perception is everything, but to reduce that down, sure. And I use that all the time in acting, but to reduce that down to this paint by numbers, simplistic way where I'm going to paint a Ferrari on my vision board. I'm going to imagine it for the next 30 days, and then it's going to magically appear with a little bit of action in my world. I know people that are into The Secret are going to, every time I talk about a certain group, Cornell, people email me from the OTO. I had an argument with the Freemasons last week. Everybody doesn't think they're in a cult. They only think that Scientology is a cult. And while they're in the Freemasons or the Secret or whatever, I had a gal try to sell me the Secret or whatever, a couple of days ago, going, don't you watch the channel? Like, I talk about that. Like, I'm not interested in buying, like, they can't see the similarities, like just how similar all this stupid stuff actually is, and they're trying to get me. They're like, I can't tell you how many people say, that's so great you got out of Scientology, Doug, but when are you going to find Jesus? If you can just find Jesus, everything will be great. I'm not knocking people that believe in that, but that's so what? I'm a born sinner, just like Hubbard told me. I'm evil to start out with, and I have to give my mind away to someone that demands me to act like him, so I can, be a good person here and live in the afterlife with Jesus. To me, that sounds that sounds like a narcissist to me, dude. Like a God that I would look up to, and it would be a real God, would allow free will, would allow you to come to your own conclusions, and wouldn't demand any obedience, any bowing. We would be like God. We would imitate him. We would be like in his image. It would be our natural state, but it's not some freaking person that we're going to have to bow down to. That's what a narcissist would tell you. True loving is having, like with my parents, as an example, it took me a long time to realize that they can actually be Scientologists. They can do whatever the hell they want, and they take the consequences of those actions, like we said earlier. So a true God, at least in my definition, is not someone that's looking to make you feel shitty if you don't do what he says. It really is love, and it really is connection, and it is giving people free will and they respect, to not have to jump in there and save everybody, but to let them learn through life experience, let them come to their own conclusions. My parents boxed me in so much with Scientology that when I got out, I had to have a lot of real life experiences, going homeless, all sorts of adventures that I would have had or needed to have, that I was insulated from because of my belief system. And just like The Secret, if you go around just thinking you can create, it's all narcissism. It's all, how can I have a bigger, fancier car? It's all about like more money and bullshit like that. I've never heard The Secret say anything about, how to go within, find out who you are, or something that didn't have to do with fucking money,
Buddhism. It's one of the truest,
by the way, L. Ron Hubbard
philosophies I've heard.
I would agree with that. Buddhism also says that Hubbard, in addition to saying that Crowley died in 1947, by the way, and he decided that he was taking the mantle of the beast from Crowley. So he literally thought he was Satan incarnate, because Crowley, by the way, was also anti-Christian when he read the Book of Revelations. In the Book of Revelations, there's a time period supposedly where the Antichrist will reign briefly. And that's how Crowley saw himself. When he read the Book of Revelations as a child, he said that he envisioned himself as the great beast. So since Hubbard loved Crowley, when he died, Hubbard considered himself the great beast. Again, you can see it in the affirmations video I have up. He literally thought Crowley was Satan. So now, since he died, he's going to take over Satan, be the mantle of the beast. And that was his whole philosophy. And also, the very top of Scientology before it was changed, again, I have a video on it on the channel, is called OTA. This is what my dad got to, although he did a different version of it. He claims, exactly like Crowley, that the big secret he's been holding from his flock. Now, Cornell, imagine paying $1 million, 30 years of your life, sacrificing your family and friends, everything in their mother to get up to the top of this bridge, where Hubbard says, now here's the big secret I've been keeping from you. And I couldn't release this material until I died. And he died in 1986, and OTA came out in 1988. And he says, I am the Lucifer, the light bringer. There's a brief period of time mentioned in the Book of Revelations where the Antichrist would reign. That's my role. Welcome aboard and help me out with the mission. So that's what Hubbard was about. He gives you clues about how much he was hinting at that, particularly in the Philadelphia Doctorate Course and other lectures, where that's what people are getting involved in when it takes 30 years and your brain, as Hubbard's son said, being shattered into a million pieces like Humpty Dumpty to figure out what Scientology is really about. But there's a lot of people that come on my channel, or just in general, that get into the tools. Like any secret society, they stay at the bottom. So the basic tools for life, the cheese that are used to bring you in, they look at people like me and Mike Rinder or Aaron and all these other people, Arnie Lerma, Jerry Armstrong, and they go, You're making a big fuss out of this. We love Scientology. It helped me out in my life. What are you guys babbling about?
It's funny because I went to, I always do this. I always go to reviews of places, and I went to the reviews of the Ventura mission. I think you left a review on it.
That's right. I think I forgot. Is it still up there, man?
Yeah, you can go on Google Maps, click on the Ventura mission of Scientology. I think it was that one or the LA one. And you were like, give me my fucking mind back and my parents back or something like that.
I remember that.
Holy review. The one in Boston,
funny.
They had a downgrade because they had this big, majestic brownstone on Beacon Street right next to the government buildings. And they had the downgrade because they had all those anonymous protests outside, and they got a lot of flack after going clear. So they moved to this shitty place, and the reviews on their mission is hilarious. Go here if you want to lose all your money and all this kind of shit. And I was going to write a review, and I'm like, I'm already in there. I'm in a book somewhere down there.
Damn right you are.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
My old address is probably still getting like Dianetics leaflets dropped through the door. I know.
I'm surprised they haven't tracked you down, Cornell, and aren't sending you mail to this day. Did you give them your real address at any time?
I can't remember. For anybody that doesn't know, when I first came to America, the first thing I did, because I worked in a magazine back home, and I was writing about everything amazing and strange, and Satanism, animal cruelty, drug addiction, and Scientology. And I started to read about Scientology because I met one of those people in the center of town, just like the Hare Krishnas, and they were doing the personality test, and I took it. I'm like, wow, this is a way of, because I always wanted to find immortality, and religion's the best form of immortality that there is, because you're not going to die, you're just going to go somewhere else. So I went and interviewed a couple of Scientologists and like wrote a big article on it, and I came to America and hooked up immediately with the Scientology church in Boston and spent a week doing a course, and I got the hell out of there after a week. I was
good
like,
for you.
People, but I was 30 years old. If they had got me 10 years earlier, they would have got me pretty good, because I was really seeking then. When you're 30 years old, you're a little wiser. So I was like, these people, I think I told the story on my website or my YouTube channel, but I got a bad feeling of every single one of them. The place was like, it was like Stepford Wives. If any of you guys ever seen that, everybody's happy and smiley, but it's like when you look to North Korea from the South Korean side, there's all these beautiful buildings and stuff, but it's a facade. There's no one in them. It's just to entice the South Koreans to come to North Korea. It's kind of like that. It's a facade. These people are like smiling. They're beautiful. They're well kempt, but they're just empty. It's
that's the end product of Scientology. Manchurian candidates, robots.
Right. So
that's what my dad is.
So we're at we're about to go to the canyon. Now you live very close to the canyon. I wish I could bring it up on
How about we do this
Google
the
Maps.
next best thing, and I'll just okay. Well, I'll explain it. But here's the book, by the way, that we're talking about. It's called Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. And let me see
if I can nod to Weird Scenes Inside a Gold Mine from Jim Morrison.
Oh, right. Laurel Canyon, Covert Ops, and the Dark Heart of the Hippie Dream. Now, I'm sure some of your listeners will know who Dave McGowan is. He also wrote this book, which I highly recommend and talk about, with the serial killers. And this one is called Program to Kill, The Politics of Serial Murder. And notice all the different serial killers that are covered in this book. This is an amazing, amazing book.
Horrible cover.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, so what we're talking about is this author, Dave McGowan, who kind of, it may not all be accurate. And whenever you look into this stuff, of course, you have to use your own discernment. And also, this Program to Kill was written in frickin' 2004. And it's just amazing that he was able to uncover this at that date. Dave died young, unfortunately, a few years ago. And if he was around today, he was one of, in my opinion, and a lot of other people, kind of one of the top researchers that could get people to look at a new version of events, what's happening behind the curtain. But he wasn't conspiracy nutter, so he could walk this fine line, because when you go down these rabbit holes, like I said, I don't do flat earth, I don't do QAnon. That's another psyop to lead people down a cul-de-sac. So you have to be careful when you right, Cornell, you know what I'm talking about, right? Because you dive down rabbit holes and stuff, right? So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about Laurel Canyon, and miraculously, I just happened to be living on Laurel Canyon while I was in Hollywood for most of the time. I describe it as I was trying to go up Scientology's bridge and trying to go up Hollywood's bridge, or ladder, actually.
Can you describe Laurel Canyon, its geographical position and its
Yeah.
relevance?
Yeah, for people that want to see it, for as long as these documentaries will stay up, I have a documentary on Laurel Canyon it's an official version, so you're not going to get the Dave McGowan version. But if you read this book first and you watch that video that I have up called Laurel Canyon, A Place in Time, it's awesome to actually see the faces and the names, and you can read between the lines even in that documentary after you read that book. So if people want to see the beauty of the canyon, and a really high quality documentary, go check that out so you can get a visual. But it's basically the canyon connects the valley, which you were talking about before, with Hollywood. And even today, a lot of famous actors and musicians and artists, Laurel Canyon is sort of a place that they flock to. Now, particularly in the late 60s, when the whole hippie revolution was kicking off, which is a complete psyop. Again, you got to read this book, and there's other ones too I could point people to. And you can check out the channel because I go into this in more detail. But let's just say it was a little less than organic. So there was a guy named John Phillips, who is the father of Bijou Phillips, whose husband is Danny Masterson, which is up on SA allegations right now. Again, small clique in Hollywood, small clique in the scene stealers, the showrunners, the frickin', the people that are going to entertain us. So in the canyon, this is where all the people suddenly met around 67. Oh, there it is, man. And do you have a picture of Lookout Mountain Laboratories by any chance?
I'll bring it up as you're talking.
Okay. So we have all the people being called out, all the people that are being distressed from their middle-class family, particularly with the song that had to do with come to California with the flower in your hair. They were pumping out music, encouraging middle-class families, like I said, that were distressed with their parents to move out to San Francisco. Boom, all of a sudden, the scene comes up. But before that happened, they wound up in Laurel Canyon. And like I said, I lived here, Cornell, while I was going up the ladder in Hollywood and the ladder in Scientology. And I just happened to run across a series of articles while I was living there. I would go to and fro this canyon every day to get to my acting class, and having my mind bent and blown, and having all these people that I grew up listening to, The Doors, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, finding out about Jim Morrison's background, which is a little shady. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I love all these bands to this day, by the way, but anybody that has gone through this process about learning more about the Laurel scene, they have their heart crushed for a little while. But anyways, like I said, there's a whole book on this, so I'm not going to break it down. But what it was about is, before the hippie thing got exported to San Francisco, it actually started in Laurel Canyon. And this is where Charles Manson ended up. Again, I have a whole nother video on what's happening with Manson at the Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco, his connections to the Process Church, the Scientology processing he did in prison, how he got his members into it afterwards, etc. Again, it's all kind of interconnected. And Charles Manson then came into Laurel Canyon. That's when the Tate LaBianca murders happened, etc. And as we know, that was what killed off the hippies. It was basically used as a psyop to make people tune in and drop out so that they wouldn't worry, and they would stop protesting about the war that was started with the false flag that involved Jim Morrison's frickin' dad at the Gulf of Tonkin. Again, consult the book or the videos.
Hold on. Laurel Canyon is where Tate LaBianca murders. Was that in that area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That is in the area. Again, it's in that canyon.
Oh,
it's not on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. It's one of the. If you watch the video at the very beginning, they'll show you all the little avenues that go off. That would be Mulholland Drive, and then Sharon Tate's place was up at the top of Laurel Canyon, and also that Lookout Mountain Laboratories. I forgot to mention this. Please check out Wikipedia or Google it, guys. It's quite fascinating. It's owned by cult leader Jared Leto now. And this was a secret military base that sat up right across, right at the heart of the canyon on Lookout Mountain Boulevard. And it also happened to be an eye line, the perfect eye line for the Tate LaBianca murders. I'm not saying that has anything to do with it. It's just very interesting when you see the view that they had of that particular murder. So anyways, Cornell, just to finish up real quick, there was a lot of activity going on. It was to create the hippie movement to remove people from protesting the war. And then when that was over, to kill off the 60s and to make the hippies look like a bunch of bad people, they sort of made Charlie be the fall guy, terrorize all of LA. These murders completely shut down the peace and love, which is all a psyop to begin with. And basically, it was business as usual. And if people want to know more about that, this is a first book to start. If you're brand new to this, let's say, I call this conspiracy theorist starter package. Like, let's say nobody knows this and they just watch TV and believe everything. Here's a perfect gradient to start with. This one's called Chaos. Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s by Tom O'Neill. And I believe I tried to get him on the show, man, but
he was interviewed on Joe Rogan.
I know. He said he would, he said for like, he gave me a decent price, but I don't pay to have people come on. I never will. So at that time, he's popular. He's like, yeah, I'll come on for a couple $100 or whatever, but maybe I can get him to come on for free when he comes out with his second book.
Start a GoFundMe. I'm sure we'd all contribute, right, guys?
I don't want to do that. I don't. By the way, I want to tell people, because I talked to one of my friends yesterday. They think I'm making a lot of money on this YouTube thing or whatever.
I know.
I don't make any money. I got demonetized a while ago. I don't have any ads, and the only ads that are up there are from the documentaries, the copyright owners themselves, or YouTube. So I make no money on ads. I have 4 Patreons. It used to be 8 when I started out, which equals like, I don't know, $38 a month or something. So this is a total labor of love. And because I don't want to profit off trauma or what I'm talking about, I personally get a ton of healing. People say it's helping them out. I get positive feedback. That's all I need, man. As soon as I start making money on this thing, you got to work around saying the right words on YouTube. I can't put up the stuff that I have without being demonetized. And it's just about the information and the message. So I don't want anybody to think I'm making money off this fucking thing.
Yeah, I have ads, but you know, I got kids to feed, and someday maybe I'll make some money.
Oh, more power. I'm not knocking. Hey, man,
I know
anybody for making money. I'm just saying I personally chose not to do that.
I make $5 a month or something like that. I haven't made my first $100 yet, and I've been doing this for
keep going, dude.
18
you will.
months.
But also, YouTube's going to censor the kind of stuff you're talking about.
I know.
So you have to choose. Do you want to? Is the message, or do you want the money? Because you're going to have to make that choice, man.
They don't mind Bigfoot because they just laugh that shit off, you know. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, you go ahead, man. Sure. Where were we at?
Well, we covered
Scientology. We've covered the background, how that kicked off, and then
you said about Scientology. Well, you have the laboratory at Lookout Mountain, and you had Manson. But what exactly happened with Manson? Was he a total psyop? Did they get him early, or I can't remember what happened there and how he became into Scientology.
Okay, I can definitely tell that. There's so many theories about Manson, and that's why I kind of left it open-ended. I did a 2-parter called The Summer of Psyops. Manson, Son of Sam, and Scientology.
Right.
No, anybody that claims that they know what the fuck happened with that, there's everything. I don't believe them, because I don't think anybody knows. But what we can do, exactly what happened, because there's so many theories, and also it's super suspect. That's why I said this is the very first book to start with, and then also an excellent one to follow it up if you want to go deeper into it. Some people will dismiss it, but I'm telling you, this is a great book. It's called The Family by Ed Sanders, and it was written very shortly after these murders happened. And also they have 2 chapters in The Family that were the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which is an offshoot of Scientology, took them to court in England, or I think it was the United States, and they got them to remove 2 very interesting chapters on the process, which I do have, by the way. I'll probably put those up at some point. But in Britain, you can actually, for like $100 or $200, you can get the original version, which ties in an offshoot of Scientology, the process, in and around the Manson murders, as well as Scientology. So you asked about Scientology. Scientology got itself into the prison systems, and still does, by a program called Criminon. Like any good cult, they have a lot of front groups, and this is how they bring people in, through their pseudo drug rehabilitation program called Narconon, which is Scientology in disguise, and a million other front groups, Wise, blah, blah, blah. And one of them is Criminon. So what they did in the 60s is they got Scientology tech into the prisons under the guise of, this is just a program to help out the prisoners. Manson got super into it, claimed that he got to the state of clear. That's a whole nother explanation that involves me having to break down Dianetics and blah, blah, blah. So let me just skip that for now. He did something called the help course. He did the communication course, which you can find in an episode called Theta Trap on the channel. And he did many other courses. And he also did something in Scientology called overrunning, which is where he kind of freaked out. This is when you don't run a process right. He went around the prisons trying to sell all the people in it. And by the way, he got into it through, there was a lot of prisoners that were taking this program. And I'm forgetting the name of the guy that introduced him to it, but he was introduced to it. He tried to introduce other people to it. They weren't taking to it. And he, when he got out of prison, went to the Celebrity Center and he went to San Francisco Scientology Center. They turned him away, said he was type 3. That means he's a psychotic. Please leave. We're not going to have you be a member. And Bruce Davis was a member of Scientology. There were Scientology wars going on up at the ranch when they were about to be caught. Again, Cornell, I'm going to break this down in a video because I don't want to lose people with all the different dots.
Right.
But when they were at the ranch, they had independent Scientologists where there was a guy up there that got Paul Watkins and a couple other people away from Scientology when they were in the desert because he was an independent Scientologist who had a better way, because Paul Watkins and Bruce Davis were Scientologists. And that was the philosophy that Manson believed in above all the other ones, only secondary to music. And they even had e-meters. They found e-meters, which he stole at the ranch. So it wasn't just some cursory thing that he was into. I showed the drills that he used with the hand mimicry with the kids on the ranch, which I did. That was one of the first drills I did in Scientology. And I'll be doing a video, like I said, that breaks down more as we go. It's a whole dot connecting thing. So people, please bear with me. There's a hell of a lot more to come. So he was into Scientology a lot. And that was now he was like Hubbard, he stole from everywhere and everybody. So that's just a part of it. But a bigger part than Scientology wants you to know. By the way, Maury Terry, who put out a book that relates to Manson, the son of Sam, and had run-ins with Scientology, was fair game by Scientology for daring to make the connections between Berkowitz, the Process Church, and Scientology. And that book, even though people will refute it, I would say that, again, use discernment, but there's a hell of a lot of very interesting information in this one. This one's called The Ultimate Evil. It's kind of a famous book in the conspiracy world, and Netflix did a decent job on making a documentary on it, but like they always do, they try to discredit him at the end. So Maury Terry was fair game by Scientology, just for even suggesting. So Manson also was quickly discredited. Manson says, the famous line you hear is, Scientology was even too crazy for Manson. That was a PR line put out by Scientology to distance Manson from Scientology. Oh. So that brings us up to, so just to connect some dots here for your listeners, that is what's the whole Laurel Canyon scene that we were originally talking is about. We have Lookout Mountain Laboratories, which is doing very interesting films for wars that were secret. Top celebrities like Marilyn Monroe, etc., made many film studio that wasn't known about. This had to do with keeping the propaganda going for the hippie movement, the war, etc., to keep the hippies in a trance, dropping LSD, and also those LSD experiments happening at the Haight-Ashbury. Again, please look up some of the videos. We talk about the Haight-Ashbury Medical Clinic, how Manson learned more of his control techniques, and also how he was being put under and learned how to control his flock via MK Ultra, pain drug hypnosis, LSD. Manson was basically a programmer. He used Scientology, and he always had on hand, even though he was broke, as much LSD as he needed. And then as soon as it was time to throw him under the bus and make him the scapegoat, even though there was plenty of other people involved, as again, Tom O'Neill's book shows, he was half right. Look, he was crazy and he was a sociopath, but he wasn't always spouting nonsense on those interviews when he's trying to say he's fucking set up. You know, he wasn't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, there's so much to unpack there. I mean,
we unpacked some of it. Right?
Right.
I read The Ultimate Evil years ago, but didn't know they did a movie on it. It's not a movie, Chris. It's on Netflix, and it should still be up there. But if not, just go to a torrent site or something and find it. It's definitely worth watching. But again, they show some very interesting evidence, and the book's way, way more packed. And again, I don't think Maury Terry got everything right, and you have to use discernment. Nor do I think Dave McGowan. Nobody's going to get any of this stuff 100% right. but you can at least get a different version than the bullshit and ludicrousness that we're supposed to believe in the official media, which is nothing more than brainwashing.
So do we even get into Jim Jones?
No. Another quick thing on the Manson. There's a fight. Again, I have up these really high quality. I didn't make them. They're made professionally by, I can only put certain ones up, but there's an ad-free 5 or 5.5 hour Manson documentary that's well worth checking out.
Oh, it's fantastic.
It's not going to get into the stuff in Chaos, but again, if you listeners, if you read these books, you know, Chaos, before you watch the serial killer stuff on there's a documentary, really good documentaries out there, Edmund Kemper, BTK, etc. This book, if you read just this one book without even reading any other ones, there's more to talk about. But if you just started out with read this book, Chaos, and Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, I don't know where it's at. And again, I threw in The Family, and then you go watch these, you know, 10 or so documentaries that are up there, even though they're official mainstream versions. I tried to pick out ones that remarkably do show quite a bit of stuff, but you have to know what the fuck is being revealed, because they're not just going to come out and say, yeah, they don't talk about MK Ultra. They don't talk about, they show the Haight-Ashbury medical clinic, but they don't go into detail about what was happening. Hence read Tom O'Neill's book. But that documentary on Manson alone will blow your guys' mind if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That was a 5-part, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's like 6 episodes. I just edited it all in one shot, no ads, float it from one thing to the next, so you can just get lost in it for like 5.5 hours.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
It's the best. It's the best Manson documentary for sure that's been done mainstream wise. But I'm still waiting for the documentary to come out on Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Days book. That would be, you know, if they would have. And I'm waiting for a documentary to come out on Tom O'Neill's book, which was almost going to be made. But I don't think they want to put these things. I don't think they want to put, I know they don't want to put the truth out. So good luck on ever seeing any documentary made on McGowan's or O'Neill's work. But if they really wanted to make money and stop selling this woke bullshit on Netflix, telling the truth would actually cause a lot of people to be very interested, because those books are eye-opening.
So I guess,
did I overwhelm you, Cornell? Too much to talk about, right?
Yeah, I just don't know where to go with it. I guess
you're doing good so far, man. You're doing just good.
I guess.
Well, maybe we can take some questions here.
Yeah, some questions, because I want to go to the global part, but I think that we have to take some questions so that people can get up to speed, particularly me. There have been some questions, but I kind of like missed them. So anybody has any questions about all of what we just talked about, go ahead. You've probably already asked them.
Damn, dude. We've already been going for almost an hour and a half. Holy shit, so much. That went fast.
People want to... Yeah, here's a good one. Jared
Leto, fucking Leto.
I don't even know who he is. I keep hearing his name.
You're going to hear more about him because his cult activities are coming out. Hey, for people that want to listen to a really cool... I just listened to one on Cult Vault, which is a really cool channel. Go help that gal get her subscribership up, man, because she's only got like 1,000 subscribers, but she has like these awesome videos. You should interview her or something, man, because she has these amazing videos, all different cults. She covers all of them, and she just put one up with someone who came out of the Jared Leto cult, which Be Kind will answer a lot of that. Go check out Cult Vault, the latest video she put out, and it's fascinating. But what she's talking about is I don't know if you know that, Be Kind, but Jared Leto basically runs a cult. I wouldn't compare it to Scientology. People aren't getting ripped off on nearly that level. But yeah, he's another typical new age guru. Same thing as the 60s. You know, it's like the same pattern being used over and over.
Is he Nexium? Is it the guy?
No, he's a what's the name of his band? Be Kind, Life on Mars or something like that. He's a famous musician. Before that, he was a famous actor. You would know him in movies like Fight Club. He played this albino guy with white hair. He had a small role in that. You would know him from My So-Called Life. Do you remember growing up? We're about the same age, right, Cornell? Did you ever see My So-Called Life on MTV, where he played like
was it at the start of the 90s? Because I didn't watch TV for 10 years.
It's a classic 90s show. Okay, classic show.
I've heard of it now. Someone else has asked the question again. We'll go back to Jared Leto, but you get asked this question every time, so you might as well answer it.
Are you really going to make me answer this again, Karen?
Let's do it real quick.
Oh my God. I want to tell people I have a 5-minute video on it's called Where is Shelley Miscavige, specifically so I'd never be asked this question again. Okay, but there's also there's some new developing news on this, so it's good to take up again. Leah Remini filed in 2013, which is the year that she escaped Scientology, a missing persons report on Shelley Miscavige. So as far as we know, she's being held not necessarily against her will. Let me back up. David Miscavige, Shelley Miscavige is kind of a sweetheart. David Miscavige, the leader of the cult, current leader of the cult, is a psychopath. She would kind of take care of the Sea Org members around her. These are the indentured slaves that were up at a place called Gold Base near Hemet, California. This is where all the top executives work. She was making some changes while David was away doing things just to help out her staff more, to get her out of the ruthlessness of how David was running things, running it complicated. She was just a caring person, from what I understand. Because she dared change things while he was away, she then exiled her. Now, Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes had a marriage several years later, and Leah Remini had the audacity to ask David Miscavige, where is Shelley Miscavige, at the wedding. David told her, you don't have the fucking rank, threw her into ethics, and she had to do thousands and thousands of dollars worth of auditing. That's where you get on the soup cans and another psychotherapist handles you. As to what she has done to David Miscavige or Scientology or what is going on in her life that caused her to be so out ethics, as they call it in Scientology. In other words, she was punished greatly for daring to question, to ask that question. She woke up in 2013, filed a missing persons report, and 2 days later, the authorities came back and said she's not missing. This is an unfounded report. We saw her. We met with her lawyer. That would be a Scientology lawyer because she wouldn't have a lawyer. And she's fine. So what's actually happened, this is speculation, but it's quite accurate from reports. So this is what the official story is as far as we know now. She was sent to a base called CST, which stands for Church of Spiritual Technology. It's a very, very secret base in San Bernardino, California. That's near Big Bear. It's out in the woods. Perfect place to isolate someone. Now, since Shelley Miscavige would be a true believer in Hubbard and not like what her husband did to her, she probably has animosity for being stuck at where she's at, but she's still serving her hat and her post in Scientology and servicing Hubbard in her mind. She doesn't want to escape because we only get out usually when we have a break of faith and when we get so broken down, when we're so beaten down. So if an authority went in there and tried to save the people at Gold Base, save Shelley Miscavige, what they don't understand is because of the brainwashing got there first. She, like I said, unless she's really, really at that breaking point, which she's probably not, she doesn't want to leave. And she'd say, what are you talking about? Leave me alone. I'm here to serve the purpose in Scientology. We were programmed, and especially at her level as a Sea Org member and you know, the wife of David Miscavige, she would be super programmed like I was to fear the outside world. Police and authorities are not there to help us. They're the enemy, as are government and everybody else. We're the only one that have the technology. What are you talking about? I don't need to be saved. Even though she was supposedly, when she's last seen, very frail, she would not be in good condition. She'd purposely be kept on a very low food and working constantly, which is how you keep people from thinking critically. So she's probably alive. They might be right. Who knows that he's killed her or had her murdered? Why don't you just bring her to the public? Why don't you just show her? You know, why wouldn't Scientology just make a PR move and just actually show her? They wouldn't necessarily do that. You know, from their perspective, they don't have to show her to the public. She probably is alive. It's possible that, you know, the police cover up everything in LA and Scientology has them completely in their pocket, the LAPD. But this was handled in San Bernardino. It's a good possibility she was actually seen and that she simply doesn't want to leave. Sorry for the long answer, but people ask that all the time. He's and I, you know, it's not like he's trying to murder her or anything. You have to understand the mindset of us brainwashed prisoners. It's a prison of the mind. Because she could A lot of people figure out how to escape off gold base, and they have inward and outward facing spikes, security, dogs they'll follow you all across the country, dude, to track you down. That's only when you want to leave. And people have done the impossible and gotten out of gold base. So she could have easily found an opportunity and planned her escape like many other people have, and would have already done that in the last 15 years if she felt like she wanted to escape. She's dead. The most likely possibility is she's simply doing her job to serve LRH, bro.
Yeah. Any other questions? We have, we're an hour 30.
That's amazing. San Bernardino County is bigger than Rhode Island.
Yeah, Rhode Island's tiny.
I hope this chat is published. Neem tree, I think it will be. What I tried to do my first live the other day, and it takes about a day for them to process the video, and then the live chat becomes available. So I'm sure it'll be available on Cornell stream. Can you share the link? It's just Neem. It's just dazed but not confused. Just like you spelled it, confused is with a Z. But if you just typed it in on YouTube, it'll be the first one that pops up.
Yeah, Cassie already shared it, but you can go to
and Cashew also shared something on Where is Shelley Miscavige, so you guys might want to check that out in the chat too. I'm going to check that out because I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so
or maybe that
I don't even know if we should get into it because the final
Jim Jones. How about real quick on that one? Again, the best document. Again, I have those documentaries up there, and I try to put in the pinned comment so people can follow along the dot connection thing. So the first one that's up there is the Process Church of the Final Judgment, which is an offshoot of Scientology. So check that one out first. Again, it's that was created by the Process Church itself, but that documentary was taken off the net. You can't find it anywhere. And even though it's their PR version, again, if you read these books, there's some very interesting information that they disclose in that 1.5-hour documentary. So start with the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Watch that 5.5-hour documentary. Take half a day when you have time and just melt into that thing. It's beautifully done too. And then after that, there's one put out by Jay Myers, who again was kicked off YouTube. It's not nearly as professional, but this is a YouTuber who dived down these rabbit holes. He's now stuck on BitChute that makes these really amazing videos. And that one has to do with Jim Jones. It starts out with Jim Jones. And he talks about Scientology, by the way, at the beginning. Someone accuses me of editing Jim Jones's voice. I didn't edit a damn thing in that. I just took out his stutters or whatever. He talks at the very video that talks about Jim Jones, the Process Church and Manson. And at the very end, it talks about, some of the Ed Sanders book, The Family we talked about, etc. He points to the book. At the very beginning, Jim Jones is talking about in the 60s and 70s when the CIA is done monitoring the cults and is now going to shut them down. And so he was talking about how Synanon was being attacked. Jim Jones is being attacked. Remember, they had David Koresh being attacked. And now he says in that video that I have up, the attack is on Scientology. So what he's talking about there is if you read Michael Myers' book, and Michael Myers is not the dude in the Halloween mask in the Halloween series. He's an author that wrote, I would say, the definitive book on Jonestown, proving it's a CIA operation, complete with the drugs, the psychic driving that we talked about the speakers, them constantly hearing Jim Jones' voice. It's a total mind control environment. And that's the best book to find on it that I found so far. It's mentioned in that documentary. Michael Myers, it's called Was Jonestown a CIA Medical Experiment? And by the way, like any good book, it's like $100 or $200 on Amazon. So you have to pay a shitload of money because I don't think they would again, we're back to the official story of Manson. There's an official story of serial killers. There's an official story of Son of Sam. Everybody thinks that everybody drank the Kool-Aid and Jim Jones. They don't know that most of those people were murdered with gunshots. So,
I heard that.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. So to go down the Jim Jones rabbit hole, go through those 3 documentaries that are lined up in order on the channel. And then if you want to fork out $100, maybe you can find it on a torrent site or maybe try Googling it. I couldn't find it. But if you're interested in that, definitely read that book by Michael Myers.
Also, if you want to hear a really good series on Jonestown, subscribe to the Martyr Maid podcast.
What's that, man?
Martyr Maid is Daryl Cooper. He's on Twitter. I'll share it with you.
Oh, cool.
But he does it's just on Apple Podcasts, but he does the Armenian genocide, Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem, and he does Jonestown as well. He does a 3-part series on Epstein. You would love that channel.
Oh, really?
I
That's
thought I sent
another
you the
thing I
link.
wanted to say. Like, I have a documentary up. It's about 2.5 hours long on Ghislaine Maxwell called Epstein's Shadow. And even
Yeah.
though it's a mainstream documentary on Peacock, they surprisingly do reveal the Mossad, CIA,
Mm,
and other interesting connections. Did you watch that one yet, Cornell? Because I'm surprised how much
yeah,
they actually revealed. And by
yeah,
the
yeah.
way, just like on Netflix, I edit all these things, by the way, but I just take out the propaganda bullshit. Like in that, the reason they were able to reveal so much on that one on Peacock is because they tried to basically pin it on Donald Trump. They showed that how it's one
Oh,
cult to rule them all, and they showed Clinton and Trump, but it was a hit piece specifically on Trump. So I just took out, dude, that they also threw in QAnon right when what was her name? Maria Farmer, who was a top whistleblower in this, who knows it's all a conspiracy and what's going on. They try to throw her under the bus. I mean, it's an amazing documentary. She oh, fuck, I forgot what I was going to say. What I'm saying is, so right after she says, look, we don't expect justice. It's a conspiracy. The rich people, there really is an elite ruling the world. All the shit that we know. That was immediately followed by a clip of QAnon, the lizard conspiracy, and they tried to make her look like a nutter. So I
oh,
cut out all the bullshit. I did the same thing in the Fall River documentary, where anytime anybody mentioned some elite connections, like the police officer did in that, they immediately follow it up with a QAnon, because that's a psyop to lead people down a cul-de-sac, to set them up for January 6th. These people are such idiots, man. It is a cult, by the way. And I would agree that Trump does run a cult. But also, if you look at the other side, Biden, like, didn't anybody listen to George Carlin? Both sides are controlled by the
yeah.
same hand. Nothing fundamental ever changes. If we could just suss that, we can start getting somewhere, you know?
Yeah, because foreign policy doesn't change no matter who's in
It
power.
doesn't. Nothing fundamental changes, and it never is until we see through these cons and start taking our minds and our power back, dude. You
Yeah,
know?
maybe if we were living in Yemen or
Yeah.
Somalia, we would have a different
But the world's
idea of
not
what's
like that
actually.
anymore. It's trying to get more and more centralized. And as we go into more, somebody mentioned the technocracy. You know, we got the Great Reset. People are sussing kind of, we're being creeped upon. You know what I mean?
What do you think of Bohemian Grove? Is that just rich guys getting off, or is there something there?
That's a real thing. I mean, that's the precursor to the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab's cult called the Young
Yeah.
Global Leaders Cult. Again, it's right in front of our face, Cornell. I don't understand why people don't see what's going on. I do understand it from the perspective of, I also used to be asleep. I'm no better than anybody else. And by a miracle, I woke up out of Scientology. But as soon as I came out of Scientology and I studied for a couple of years about how this works, it's so obvious what's happening on the global scale is exactly the same thing that I was surprised that the X community didn't suss that. They go right back to the normie world. They go vote. They believe in all this bullshit. For me, I don't understand why people don't see that. I mean, maybe they don't see Klaus Schwab at the Young Globals Leader. I mean, you can only find that on BitChute. They are, nothing on the mainstream. It's called the mainstream to keep you on the mainstream so you don't fucking step off of it and question it. As soon as you go to one of these other platforms, which I've spent the last decade on, like BitChute or Odyssey or whatever, there's simply, people aren't getting the right information. They're not privy to hearing at least the other side of the story because it's censored. It's about the control of information. So I always figured that everybody's on BitChute and already has been watching what's been going on during the pandemic and all this, but they're just eating up the fucking TV. So they're not seeing the obvious. Just to your listeners or people that might not know what the hell we're talking about, Justin Trudeau, Putin, whatever is Zelensky, I can't pronounce his name, the dude that, Ukraine, all of these people are
Zelensky.
graduates of all of these people think they're fighting each other and everything. They're all graduates of Klaus Schwab's cult, which is just like going down to Scientology and getting brainwashed for a certain agenda to impose on the world. And again, if people want to know about that or what's going on, you have to jump off the mainstream, take the leap, go over to these other platforms where you can actually listen to information that's not being suppressed. And there's a reason it's being suppressed. And then just make up your own mind. Figure it out for yourself. But you're not going to be able to have the information to work with if you just stay on fucking YouTube or, glued to the television. That's there to hypnotize you. Yeah.
Chris Hedges is a war correspondent. He was around during the Central American Wars. He was around during Bosnia. And he said after Vietnam, they figured it out that they had these reporters and they were embedded and they just went wherever they wanted. But during Iraq and stuff, they had these reporters and they were told where to go and stuff. New York Times and Washington Post reporters. And they were told where to go. But Chris Hedges was independent. He actually left the New York Times because they told him where to go and he wasn't allowed to just go wherever he wanted. And now he's independent. So that's why I listen to now. I listen to independent war reporters and stuff because that's where you find out the real truth, because it's totally sanitized and they learned that after Vietnam.
That's a great point. And that kind of, maybe that's a good place to kind of wrap up, because what's the point? Why do we go back to the 40s and 50s? What was the point of talking about any of this stuff? What was the point of these cults? What was the CIA and the other intelligence agencies? What was MI6? What were these people trying to do behind the scenes with MK Ultra? Well, if you read Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, and you combine that with George Orwell's 1984, which he, by the way, was a member of the Fabian Society. That's how you get this insider knowledge. Most of the members of the secret societies are kept dumbed down. Though only those at the top sort of know what the agenda is for the whole cult. Again, we're back to the compartmentalization. But if you grow up in one of these secret societies, like, Huxley or Orwell, you can be privy to what's coming in the future because it's already set in advance. So what they were trying to do in the 60s specifically, and why they weren't just taking down these cults immediately and monitoring, quote unquote, is to find out how to apply this to the global population. As technology has come in and a few people can control all the information, an example would be Mark Zuckerberg. He did not form Facebook. He's a front man. He's not a genius. All these people are front men. Even the Klaus Schwabs and stuff, they're just doing their job. They're just people that are put out there. All the world's a stage, and these are the fucking puppets that are doing what they're told at their little cult meetings, whether it's Bohemian Grove, like this person mentioned, the Committee of 300, the World Economic Forum, that World Health Industry or whatever. Those are words straight out of 1984. So if people, to give people a clue, there's been a program to try to find out how to apply this to the world as technology has gotten more and more into, and centralization has gotten into fewer and fewer hands. All you have to do, which is why I encourage people to read this book, which is the one that snapped me out of this and sent me down these rabbit holes. If you are not into conspiracies, but you just want to have practical information on how this works, how this would be possible, while everybody doesn't have to be in on a secret. If you control information and you don't get if you can do that, which you can with the way we're being set up with the technology, then you can control the narrative that goes on as in programming into people's head, and you can control their reality, what they'll believe is true, what they'll support, what they won't support, who they'll fight, who they'll attack. And this has been put to very effective use, especially recently, to divide the population on every level, to fight about race, to fight about wars. Just in the last 3 years, we've had so much stuff thrown at us. I don't know if people can remember what it was like in 2019 when we still had all the problems, the snakes still creeping up behind us. It's just that it's out on the world stage where, I don't know if people are noticed, but it's not just an accident that we're suddenly being hit from every angle and confused and divided and ruled over. So that's what that's all about, dude. And that's what, think about it. If you were a psychopath, again, we're back to H.G. Tudor, sociopaths, and the sociopath next door. One of the hardest things to wrap my mind around with Hubbard, I couldn't comprehend how someone would spend their entire life learning and doing what he did, because I could never do that. So already what a psychopath can and will do is outside of most people's reality. They'd never do that, because you would never do that. But every day Hubbard woke up and asked himself, how can I control my flock? How can I control the world just a little bit more today? How can I consolidate power? How can I make a little bit more money? So what do you think these people, like Bill Gates and everybody that are meeting, whether it's in their stupid little robes at the little secret society out in the Bohemian Grove, they're meeting at the World Economic Forum, or the young global leaders? What do you think the Great Reset is? If you could put yourself in their shoes, if you didn't have a conscience, if everything was about money and power to you, wouldn't you try to apply this technology of mind control in as broad a fashion as you can? Again, Cornell, that's easy for me to see. Like I said, I'm thankful for growing up to Scientology, as torture as it was, because it completely opened up my eyes I don't fall for any of the bullshit, because once you can see it, it's laughable, but it's not funny and it's not seeable when you're under the spell. So if I didn't grow up in Scientology, if I didn't get a condensed version of the microcosm of the macrocosm, I would have no interest in this subject. I'd believe everything that I'm told, just like I did when I was in Scientology, and I would be none the wiser. You know, that's why I think shows like what we're talking about are important, because, you know, there's a lot of information that's missing that if people had access to it, their minds would open up, and they could also take their sovereignty and their minds and their freedom back from these psychopaths.
So, guys, you all have homework to do, basically.
Yeah, we get. It sounds like
go to Doug's channel, and there's a lot of stuff there if you want to read up on a lot. But that's only touching the surface, right, Doug? But you give
and your audience is already up to speed on all this. You know, I want to get guests on. If anybody's listening, or whatever, I'd love to. That's why I try to bring people on, like HG Tutor, and got some other ex-Scientologists coming on too, ex-Mormons, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. Anybody, there's people that can explain this way better than I can. I don't like trying to explain it. So everybody's got a piece of the puzzle. If anybody wants to come on mine or your show, please reach out to us, because everybody has, you know, there's so many people out there, bro, that email and stuff that have stories to tell. I just wanted to let them know they're more than welcome to fricking come on and share whatever they want to share.
Yeah, I started this channel as everything kind of a channel, a poor man's Joe Rogan, but then I started talking to Bigfoot people, and that was really interesting to me. But at some point, I couldn't tell the same story over and over and over again, because I hadn't seen one myself. So I'm still doing that, but I want to open it up to this.
I've noticed you doing that, man. You got somebody, graphic designer, to make, you know, a kick-ass new rebranding of the channel. You get the bitchin' green screen in the back, Scientology, MK Ultra, and global mind control. By the way, you're seated right next to Charles Manson and Jim Jones. You might want to move out of the way of those too. No, it's looking good, Cornell. It's looking good, man. I don't know how to do any of this crap.
It's fun.
Man.
It's fun as hell.
It's fun. And it's rewarding too, man, because, like, at least for the time being, we have this awesome platform. You know, as much as I bag on YouTube and Google for censorship, they do let us get away with quite a bit. It's all free, and they give us the opportunity to get out the message in a way that can't happen through the mainstream. So I'm really thankful.
When we were growing up, this information was impossible to come by.
Exactly. So as more and more information control goes in, more censorship happens. There's also the reverse happening, where there's so much access to information. Even YouTube will let you say certain things. And there's plenty of other platforms where we know. That's why I'm saying I wish Dave McGowan was around, man, because he finished his last Program to Kill was in 2004. And just with the amount that we know that we didn't know 10 years ago, there's so much that we can access that and learn about that was completely hidden when we were out of the public consciousness when we were growing up, but not with the internet. That's what's taken down Scientology. And that was their Achilles heel, by the way. And that's what Hubbard didn't foreshadow. We could go into the whole Scientology internet thing, maybe in the next one, if you want to do another one or whatever, but it's too long to get into. But let's just say the internet might be the death of these psychopaths and these cons and these psyops.
That's kind of fun having them around in a sense, though, isn't it?
How so?
It's like, well, I'm not a victim of it.
They're a blast, you know, taking the thing. If you know, when the scales came off my eyes, what they're doing. Oh, it is. It's a great time to be alive. But we got to challenge these people, man, because we're going to be leaving behind a world that's going to make sign for our kids and grandkids. This is why I'm so motivated, Cornell, because this is not my natural inclination to do any of this. I just wanted to be an actor, man. That was the life that I had planned. But then Hollywood's corrupt, and I went down the rabbit hole like a lot of other people. I feel like I got a preview in Scientology of what the world's going to look like if we don't challenge what's happening, because it's going to make Scientology, and dude, it's horrible. Trust me, when you're under that, and especially trying to get out, if we don't challenge the agenda, we're going to be leaving behind a world for our children and grandchildren that's going to make Scientology look like a Sunday school. That's why I'm motivated. I can see where this is going, and anybody else that can. The more we speak out, the more we put out information and let people make up their own minds, they'll have an alternative. And if we don't do that, we have to, dude. Trust me, we have to, because, you know, I'm only gonna, what am I, almost 50? I don't even remember how old I am. About 50. So my life's already like almost done. I mean, I'll be out of here in 20 years, 30, hopefully before 80, because I don't want to grow whenever I can't, whatever. I don't give a fuck. What I'm saying is
I want to go out quick.
a good portion of my life is gone. So I just want to dedicate it, man, to making sure that what we leave behind, it's just, like Cornell, it's a great time to be alive, man. And now is the time to challenge psychopaths.
And we're going to leave it at that. Guys, we're going to do this again. So thanks everybody for joining.
Yes, thank you.
See you soon.